Welcome to the 2015 Program Evaluation Virtual Summer School. I'm Karen Ballard on behalf of the National Association of Extension Program and Staff Development Professionals and the Southern Region PSD Program Leadership Network. We appreciate your participation in today's webinar. During the next hour, you're going to be asked to be engaged in really an educational conversation where we learn from one another. Participants are joining us today from over 36 states. So let's make the most of our time together. If you haven't done so already, get ready to participate in the discussion through Zoom Q&A feature on your screen or through the live polls. So let's get started. Today's presentation is, Oh, What a Tangled Webinar We Weave. This session will look at the intricacies and continuous development of best practices for webinars and blended courses based on user feedback, instructor experiences, a little bit of failure, and even evaluation results. Our presenters are Mary Poling and Julie Robinson. Mary Poling is the coordinator for interactive communications with the University of Arkansas Cooperative Extension Service. Since 2007, Mary has been using online video conferencing for meetings and in-service training. The online meeting platforms Mary has used include Centra, TTVN web meetings, and currently Zoom. A native of Illinois, Mary has a BS from the University of Illinois and was a 4-H agent in Illinois for 7.5 years. Dr. Julie Robinson is an assistant professor of instructional design with the University of Arkansas Cooperative Extension Service. A native of Arkansas, Julie has a BS from Arkansas State University, MS from the University of Arkansas, and a PhD from the Ohio State University. Julie began her distance learning career coordinating and co-instructing plant pathology courses as a program associate at the U of A Department of Plant Pathology. She was also a research associate at OSU while obtaining her PhD, where she taught undergraduate courses for agriculture and extension majors and wrote her dissertation on the uses of online tools in educational programming. Be prepared to be a part of the action. Both Mary and Julie value the collaborative process, and today is no exception. Join us in welcoming Julie Robinson and Mary Poling.
And so we just want to jump right in with our Tangled webinar today. So we're going to share our screen, and when we share our screen, our picture is going to go over to the side. You can hide it if you like, or leave it open. So we're going to share our screen, and
so today we're going to be presenting our title is Oh, What a Tangled Webinar That We Weave. And so we're going to be talking about all things webinar. We're going to show you guys some examples of how we have at University of Arkansas incorporated webinars into some of our courses, either face-to-face or online, to kind of create a blended course. And then we're also going to talk about best practices for planning and then hosting webinars. So first of all, we're going to throw out some disclaimers, apologies, and biases. The disclaimers are, these are what work for Arkansas Extension, although they can be generalized to other webinars. A lot of the practices that we learned were kind of baptism by fire. We needed it yesterday or 5 minutes ago. And then after the fact, we were able to actually go back and look at the research and found out that we were actually doing a lot of things right, some things wrong, but a lot of things right. Apologies if anybody is kind of scared of spiders. I just want to go ahead and apologize for our theme. And then also biases. Mary and I really like to use a lot of images and video. So if you're looking for a really bullet point heavy PowerPoint, this is not your webinar.
and another bias is we do really like Zoom. We've been using Zoom since probably fall of, we tested in 2012. But this is not about the Zoom platform. So whatever platform you're using is the one you need to get comfortable with and to use. Just so happens that we like the Zoom one. Let's talk about our definition of a webinar. And so Google says that a webinar is a seminar conducted over the internet. And you take the two words web and seminar and you get webinar. Okay. Fun fact, the first known use of internet with a webinar was in 1998. That's not counting CIV and teleconferencing. Our definition of webinar for Arkansas Extension and the use of Zoom, it could be any training, any session that we have online, and it could be one way, which is the camera. Today is a one-way webinar. We're sending our picture out and our voice out. You will communicate with us through the Q&A box, and I'm going to cover that in just a second. Or some of our trainings are two-way, because we do have the capability to conduct two-way with Zoom in a meeting or a training session. So the Q&A in the pre-session, if you were on already, if you're on a computer, your Q&A box is in the upper left-hand corner. You can open it up. If you're on a mobile device, it's usually in the upper right-hand corner. If you're on the phone, you just get to listen, and we're glad you're listening today. And this all will be posted on the NAEPSDP website later, and you'll get an email next week with the link to it. But let me tell you something. We have based many of the things today on webinars with WOW. And so we want to encourage you and invite you to join in the conversation and dialogue with us through the Q&A. And you can use it to answer one of our questions. You can use it to comment or brainstorm. And when you do, your name will be entered in a drawing for this book. We have an extra book. Thanks. Karen helped us out on that. And we will put names in a hat and draw, and we'll send it to you. All right.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and just jump right in, and we're going to talk to you guys about some of the tales from our trenches, and like I said, some of those instances where we were able to incorporate webinars into our courses or into our in-services or any other type of training for kind of a blended course.
So the first kind of use, and our center was our platform. We did in-service training for agents, and it was really the SNAP-Ed trainings that drove it. And I was working with SNAP-Ed at the time on how to do their reports. And it started out one way and two way, but we had, state staff did trainings with our agents. And the thing that when we started out and had evaluations come back from the in-services, this was early on. Keep it on Centra. There's no travel time loss. But here was a cue that we need to do something different, something to help keep us away, because we were being boring because we were sharing reporting. Another one says, I like it a lot. I can sit at my desk. I don't have to drive 2.5 hours to Little Rock. Very effective. So that was our first entrance into webinar meeting platform online.
So another opportunity that we were fortunate enough to get to partner with some Michigan State folks, specialists and county educators, and they delivered conflict smoothies. And so this was via webinar, and we were actually the recipients. So this was a really good opportunity for us to see how webinars are delivered from the participant view. And we also paired that with online discussion boards. And so this was really a truly blended type of course. And then we wrapped up with a one-day face-to-face session. We didn't get to travel to Michigan. We just stayed here at home in Arkansas. Another way that we've incorporated webinars into our new agent onboarding program, I like to refer to this as one of the pieces of the trifecta of our new agent onboarding program that Rich Poling and Karen Ballard have done a really great job of developing. And this is what we call Mintables, and they are monthly, once a month, hour-long webinars, and we have specialists or content experts or veteran agents talk to these first-year agents about relevant topics that they're going to encounter, and it's all done via webinar. And like Mary said, this is actually in a Zoom small meeting, so it's two-way, so they can hear us, we can hear them, and we can see them and they can see us. And the other good thing about this is there's no supervisors allowed, so the agents have kind of that freedom of being a little bit more open and honest than they might be if some supervisors were present. Our first really big training using Zoom, kind of that summer, fall of 2013, was the Division of Agriculture here in Arkansas decided that we were going to totally revamp our website and we were going to get current. And so we had to train all of our extension personnel on how to update their website pages. So we did a combination of Zoom trainings, and then we also had a very talented grad student create online tutorials that she posted, and then we also incorporated some face-to-face. And then one purely online webinar idea, or not idea, but training in service that we provide to Arkansas Extension personnel is lunch and learn. And oftentimes we do these in kind of series, but not always. Anyway, this was a tech series that we did last fall about all things technology, whether it was software programs or updates or anything like that. And basically it was just noon to 12:30, small piece time webinar they could join while they were sitting at their desk eating their lunch. And this was our first big use of Zoom webinar. So it was a very educational experience.
Our Farm Bill webinars were an example Julie talked about. You know, we needed it yesterday, we needed it last fall, and we started those in January. We had 23 webinars from the middle of January to the 1st of April, and it was baptism by fire. And it was our first really outreach, working with outreach, reaching our clientele, and has evolved into now that we have a food and agribusiness webinar that continues it, and we repurpose the recordings. We have some people live, and there's a lot of people that can't attend. Then we post the recording on the website, so we're getting a lot of content. It's also our first partnering with an outside agency, with the Farm Service Agency, in sponsoring it. So that was our first big kind of foray into outreach.
So the personal safety for you, we used webinar. We had a state, an event happen here in the state that kind of brought to light that we needed to help train a lot of our extension personnel on how to protect themselves, especially in our rural areas. So we partnered with another branch of the U of A system and brought in Officer Jennifer. And yes, in that picture, she's 6'1", and I've got on 4-inch heels, and I still look small or short. But anyway, so we had her come in and they did a webinar, and this was either watching the webinar live or the recording was a prerequisite to be able to participate in the face-to-face training. And so this was a really great in-service that we were able to provide to our extension personnel across the state.
As a result of canceled flights, we had the opportunity to do our first all-day training for instructor qualification. Our instructors that were doing the yoga for kids were traveling to South Dakota, and one of the days was canceled because they were stuck in an airport. So this gave us a great opportunity, and it combined lecture and then demonstration here in our studio, and then we could see the students, the participants in South Dakota. It also combined gave them an opportunity to do some pre-planning and test and practicing in groups, and they had a site facilitator there, and then they demonstrated, and our people here evaluated them. So it was a great opportunity. It was two-way, and that was a good experience, and the South Dakota group said it was good for them too.
And so the last example that we're going to give here is our virtual field trip. And this was where we actually invited high school students across the state of Arkansas to come with us out to a soybean field. And this was probably our first big webinar that we did to external audiences. And it was also our first webinar that we did that was on a very tight time schedule. So it was almost kind of like a live broadcast. And very educational experience because we weren't inside, and that was our first experience with that.
And it definitely needed a pilot test.
Yes.
So we've talked long enough. And so you've heard our ideas of what we use. We want you to open your Q&A box and type in what are some ideas you can incorporate online webinar into your programs for your state, or things that you have already done. And this is a good share session. So if you would open your Q&A, we're going to look at some of them. And
yes, new staff orientation, great example, Jan.
Right. So go ahead. Remember, your name goes into the drawing when you enter.
Yeah,
for the book.
Our book.
Let us know it.
Money management workshops, trainings for educators.
Great.
Wow, we're getting a lot of really great examples, guys.
And as we're doing this, I need to recognize we have some silent and not so silent panelists that, well, you heard from Karen earlier, but she and Rich Poling are monitoring the Q&A because we have limited access to it. And they're going to, as soon as they mark it live or answer it by text, everybody should see what everybody's sending in. You can send anonymously if you like.
Mhm.
So, and we will summarize some of these and look at them later. So
a lot of updates for various program areas, monthly meetings for county faculty or state or regional updates, a lot of SNAP Ed, and then also several recommendations for partnering with external groups about money management and finance. So a lot of really great ideas.
And I think what we've found too is when you're teaching or having to train for things that people need to do at their desk, how great is it that they can be at their desk, watch and dialogue with you in the training, and then turn around and do it immediately versus driving somewhere, hearing about it, driving back home and like, oh, forgetting about it. So great. Thank you. You can keep those coming in at any time. We're going to move on because we want to get into.
So one of our interactive pieces that we'd like for you guys to participate with us today, if you clicked on the link that Karen sent for the handout that we have provided for you on the NAEPSDP website, go ahead and pull that out or pull it up on your computer or mobile device and kind of follow along with us. And at the top part of that handout, we've got this graphic. And so what we're going to cover today are the 4 threads to building and planning and conducting a good webinar.
And if you don't have the handout, just take a piece of paper and draw yourself a web. Yep. Weave a web right there.
So the first step or the first thread to creating a good webinar is planning.
And just like face-to-face meetings or face-to-face events, really, this is more of an event. You want to look at the who, what, when, where, how, and why. So let's look at the who and when. This is an example of how we did parallel planning and production process, but identifying who's going to do what, when they need to do it, and how soon they need to do it.
You also need to decide when you're going to do things. So this example here on the left is a live webinar, or well, they're all live, but a webinar that we did that we were on a very tight time schedule. And so we had to plan everything out to the minute. So whenever you're planning, you have to figure out when you're going to have all the different presenters and different roles do their job duties. And then another thing that you need to figure out when you're going to do whenever you're planning a webinar is here on the right. On the Lunch and Learn Tech series that we did, we had to decide when we were going to initially notify all of our extension personnel how far out to let them know when each webinar was going to be. And then also we had to decide when was going to be the best time to let them know. And we actually planned and always did notify them the day of. And FYI, that was when we always got our biggest enrollment.
Okay, and who? The number of people you need to conduct a webinar online or face online is depends on the scope of your program. So at minimum for us, we need a producer, and our producer is Buff sitting over there. You don't see him. You may hear him laughing a little bit.
Yep.
Usually I'm sitting there, but a producer, a host, Karen's our host today, recorder and a backup. We have two people recording so that we can have a good, guaranteed to have a good recording. And those are our minimums. Now, if your host is just acting as the moderator in the engagement, you might have content experts, like in our Farm Bill webinars, in our soybean science, the virtual field trip, we had content experts. So yeah, and you may need some extra technical assistance. So these are, the bottom left is a screenshot from the last NAEPSDP Member Connect webinar where Diane was the host, and this was her screen. So that's the who. How? We want to look at how are we going to be connected. This is a speedtest.net, and if hardwired is the best, we're hardwired today, but if you have to be Wi-Fi, how fast is the Wi-Fi, or do you need to use a MiFi? An example, we had the MiFis in the building and they didn't work very well. We moved them outside. They still didn't work very well, so we went to the field. The other thing is how are you going to handle the participant questions, and that we are not looking at the questions and answers as they come in, unless we ask you a question box. That's what Kieran and Rich are watching, and then they're going to shoot us the questions after we finish. So don't worry, we will answer your questions. But that's, you have to cover all those things. And then who's going to be doing the instructing, or how will you instruct, is in the example of the South Dakota one. How are you going to, this is not up there, but how are you going to promote it and advertise it?
And then you also have to think about where. So think about your studio setup, your office setup, your conference room setup, or your field setup, and think about the supplies that you need, especially if you're not going to be at your home base. So remember and think about all the things that you need to take with you.
All right, it's time for a polling question. So Buff's going to start our poll. In creating your plan, when should webinars be evaluated? That's part of the planning. When are you going to evaluate? All you evaluators out there. Yeah. So if you would, Buff's going to launch the poll.
Okay.
And if you would tell us when you think webinars should be evaluated.
And you've got 3 options: never, 24 hours after, or during the webinar. And just go ahead and pick which one of those you think is best. And we're actually going to, we'll leave it open for a little bit longer, but we're going to actually leave you guys hanging and let you know the answer to that a little bit later.
Okay. Do we want to share the results though? Are we?
Yeah, we can share the results now.
You want to close the poll and we're going to share the results and then we'll tell you the answer.
Okay. So 61% think it's during the webinar, 38% 24 hours after, and only 2% thinks it's never. And whoever that one person is, you better not let this group of evaluators know.
Okay, we'll answer that in a little bit, but let's talk about the next thread, which is prepare. Compelling content. So in webinars with WOW, I love these 2 quotes. Death by lecture is one way to kill motivation, and PowerPoint pew. We'll talk about PowerPoints in a little bit.
So one of the things that you need to think about is inserting compelling content into your webinar. Like I said, Mary and I like to use a lot of images. We also like to use a lot of videos when we can. So kind of think about not killing people with all of your bullet points and incorporating graphics or shapes or just kind of images that depict a process that you might be covering, and just kind of think about that compelling content. And as gross as this slide may seem, I doubt very many of you are going to forget it. So just kind of keep that in mind.
The other thing is engagement. Engagement is very important to engage. You can engage. Right now we're using the Q&A and the polls to engage. In one of the virtual field tour, we had our host moderator, her sole purpose was to engage the audience. You can see she had this lower right hand corner, she had the school mascots. So when she saw that somebody came in from a certain school, she'd give a shout out to their mascot, and boy, that brought the engagement in right away. Through social media, retweeting, and this was one of the participants was retweeting her screen that she was seeing. The other thing again is through Q&A or engaging co-host. We had the particular weather webinar, and the presenter was quite engaging with our AggieCon specialist.
Another way that you can kind of incorporate some compelling content is, if you have a chance, a little bit of spontaneity never hurt. As you can see, we're going to show you a video during the middle of a field trip that we took, and kind of woke our participants up if any of them were sleeping.
What was that?
So just another way that you can incorporate some compelling content.
Okay, open up your Q&A if it's not already open, and let's brainstorm some ideas for how any of us can incorporate compelling content or engagement in a webinar or an online meeting. So please go ahead and send your ideas. What ideas have worked well for you? And just hit that submit and send it to us. Anybody have any ideas on what has worked well, or an idea that you could have some compelling content?
Food prep demonstration, polls. asking
Ask
questions.
Good.
Personal pictures of attendees. Yeah.
Right.
Kind of help bridge that disconnect that some people had. Whiteboard interactions are really great. Animated and energetic presenters. Oh, and I like this one. Give points if you have teams. I like a little bit of competition.
That's great.
Yeah.
There are some webinar platforms that allow you to have breakout rooms and do that sort of thing. So great. Thank you. And continue, if you have ideas, continue to put them in there.
All right. But we're going to keep moving forward.
And let's talk about that PowerPoint. In Webinars with WOW, she talks about use of whiteboard. Someone brought that up, using a whiteboard or to let people, engage them in drawing on it. We do not have that capability in Zoom webinar, but the Blackboard is to say using dark slides with white lettering is good, adding some color. It doesn't have to be black, but that was the example. The other thing is stop shouting. Don't be using those cap locks. And she talks about a 2x2 rule, and that's per every slide, no more than 2 fonts and 2 different sizes. So that's the 2x2 rule in PowerPoint. And less is more. Reduce those bullet points and reduce those words and increase those graphics. Those were all ideas that she put forth in this book. So, and the third thread is practice, 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 and practice some more.
We like to bring in our content expert, or as we like to call them, the talent. Makes them feel a little bit more special, especially when you're asking so much of them. But we usually bring them in and kind of provide them with a little bit of a coaching session. And we're fortunate enough that we've got a communications department that we're able to team up with, and they're able to provide their expertise to our experts and provide them with a coaching session to help them figure out what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, how to engage the audience, show that enthusiasm that someone mentioned earlier. And then also rehearsal is key. And any of your presenters, even for the summer school sessions here, will tell you that they practice with Mary twice, I think, or
Some of them,
something,
yes.
something like that. So you can see pictures here. The one in the upper left-hand corner is actually Amy Cole, who you'll get to see on Friday, practicing her session. And then another picture of us practicing with another one of our talented people out in the field.
Okay, so we've got another poll, Buff, you can start for us. How many hours do you think we spent practicing for a single virtual field trip? So in there, your choices are less than 50 hours, 51 to 100, or more than 100. And when we get close to 3/4 people who have entered the polling, we'll close it and we'll share the results and see how many get close to the actual number. So okay, let's close the poll and share the results.
All right, so 56% think less than 50 hours, 37% think it was 51 to 100, and about 8% think that it was more than 100 hours.
And 8%, you're right. It was with all the people involved in the planning and production process, about 513 hours. And I don't have the numbers on. There were at least about 8 of us, I'm guessing.
Yep.
All right. So it does take
it does
practice.
take time. So the fourth and final thread in creating and delivering a webinar is deliver or perform, if you want to say. One of the biggest things is start on time, end on time. You've got people participating, coming in a webinar, and they're doing it during a set amount of time, whatever you advertise. So you need to try and adhere to that. Technical difficulties, happen, but really try and stick to that schedule.
And so we have another polling question here, because this is where we're going to do our evaluation. And we're not going to share the results. And this is, so Buff, if you want to start this poll, we have 3 evaluation questions that we would like you to answer or contribute. How useful was the content? How present have you been? And then how effective were the presenters. And so if you want to go ahead, there's 3 questions within that poll, and then submit it, and we'll let you finish that.
And this is in response to our question that we asked earlier. 3/4 of the way is what research shows is best practice for getting best, or not best polling results, but getting more responses to your evaluations. Now, we have done evaluations, sent out evaluations 24 hours after, but this way, doing it 3/4 of the way through a webinar is when we get the highest response rate.
Now, if you're doing a series, you may do an evaluation right here on just this particular one of the portion of the series, but you may want to follow up with a more detailed and see your evaluators for creating that.
Yeah.
So, okay, Buff, if you want to close the poll, and we're going to move on.
Okay, we've just got a few more best practices that we're going to kind of talk about.
Well, and one of the best practices of getting a good evaluation and also ensuring that things will go smoothly, and it's actually a webinar etiquette, is those cell phones. Turn off the cell phones and forward your office phones. But sometimes things happen, as you'll see here.
Updating those yields included covered commodities that were planted in 2008 through 2012.
All right, so that was during one of our Farm Bill webinars. That presenter, she just kept on going. We were busting the gut on the side, and Bobby was scrambling to find his phone, but that happens. And we talked about, have you turned off your cell phones about several times, but anyway. So you have to be able to go with the flow, and when things happen, you move on. Like now, the slide doesn't want to go forward. Well, let's see if we can find our mouse back here. Oh, so you know what? PowerPoint is not responding. So hang on. Hang on. How appropriate that it tells us things are not happening. So let's stop sharing for just a second. Okay, hang on. Let me stop sharing. Let me try it again. It's probably not going to go. It's not responding. So,
Okay.
All right. So let's close the program.
Okay.
Except we really, really want to open it again, because I think it'll be important for you to be able to see the last slides pictorially. So let's try it again. So Julie, talk about what these pictures are going to do.
So we're going to show you some pictures to also, I mean, this is just absolutely perfect, and I swear we didn't plan it. Our last best practice is to remember to always be fluid. We call it punting. A lot of times something may go wrong, and you just have to step back and punt and figure out how you're going to make that work. And so one of the images that we've got that we're going to show you is actually Mary having a little bit of a moment of wondering what in the world happened whenever she lost internet connection during a webinar. Another one is going to be whenever we ended up having to, we thought we were going to be able to use an office's wireless connection, and it wasn't good enough. And so we ended up actually having to move out to a field and try to find any and all supplies we could out of our cars to block the sun from glaring off of the laptop computer screen. And then also, you know, we talked about rehearsal. Well, whenever you rehearse with someone one time and they're in their office or a very appropriate facility or location, and that's great, but then the day of, they wind up at home and this is their background, you've got to be ready to just turn off their video and only show their PowerPoint. So these are just a couple of examples of things that we have encountered, and you've just, like I said, got to be ready to step back and punt and figure out what you're going to do.
And last, the after party. So after it's over, this is something I learned a long time ago, and I like to debrief this way, that everybody who was part of the group, the presenters, the host, the technical host, and whoever, debrief and go around and name one thing. Each person gets to name one thing that was the best or that went well. And then after we do that, we go around the room and say one thing that needs to be changed. So we have a lot of fodder for today, but anyway, it's always fun to be able to debrief and then be able to laugh about a few things. So if that's what we have today, and this is our contact information, and we're gonna if you have ideas and want to contact us and partner with us sometime,
Okay.
be happy to. There's a
And like Mary said, feel free to contact us if you have any further questions. We're just excited to have the opportunity to be here today with you guys, and we definitely encourage you to participate in the other webinars that Karen's got going on this week. They're going to be really good learning opportunities.